Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It is great to have you here today. Today, I have as a special guest Randolph Richardson. Joining me. It is great to have you here today.
My apologies. That's
okay.
I had it open in the background. I thought I muted it. Go on. Sorry. I'm very sorry.
That's okay. So, how are you today, Randolph?
Doing good, aside from that terrible mistake I just made of leaving the screen open in another window. I really didn't mean to do that. Yeah, no, it's hot weather here, so it's a little more warmth here than I'd like. But and I'm guessing by your attire that it's kind of warm in your part of the world as well.
It is. It is quite warm here today. Robin, my son and I usually go for a walk every day after lunch, as long as it's not too hot out. And today we got all of one block from the house, and Robin said, "Let's go to the pool instead." And the funny part is that the pool in our neighborhood is not a temperature controlled pool, and we're used to it being rather cool. And so we put on our suits and so forth, and we came into the pool and we got in the water. I have never encountered the water in that pool being that warm before. That is the hottest I've ever seen it, or I should say, felt it.
We had almost a month ago now. We had one really hot day, the hottest weather we've had in a long time, 40 degrees in metric. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. That's Celsius. And we decided to rent a hotel that day because 36 degrees and 33 degrees the days before was already ridiculously hot, and we don't have an air-conditioned home. So we go to the hotel. Lovely to have all the air conditioning. It was relaxing. And then we had to come back home because we realized we forgot to bring something for one of the kids. And so we come in, and the floorboards all feel, because we have hardwood floors, it feels like they're being preheated for a sauna or something.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, so we had the windows open while we were there. Of course, we had to close them for security at night. And it was just it was amazingly hot. So it was, in retrospect, a good decision to spend the money to be at the hotel just for that one night. The next day was much cooler. It was the right night to choose for it.
And the Lone Wanderer's Bunker has just become a member of the channel, and I thank you very much, Lone Wanderer, for joining the channel. It's great to have you as a new member.
Excellent. I know the Lone Wanderer's Bunker. Hello.
And I'm going to put up my patrons. If you came here today and you're looking for where is Jenni Morgan, you're expecting Jenni Morgan, we're actually going to kind of do a two-part show here. And the first half is going to be with Randolph Richardson and talking about Conservapedia. And then after I've talked to Randolph for a while, then we're going to bring in Jenni Morgan, and we're going to talk about transgender legislation and court updates. So with that, let's take a look. Yeah, and Randolph is going to stay for the second half as well. You know, his comments on transgenderism are going to be certainly welcome as well. And actually, Jenni hasn't arrived yet. And if Jenni does arrive before we're done with the first half, she obviously is welcome to talk to about Conservapedia. Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at, this is it, Conservapedia. I had never heard of this until just a couple of days ago. And as you see, they claim that they have over 8 million views. And they have a lot of different categories that they have articles on. There's one for Benjamin Franklin. There's one for Jesus Christ. There's one for atheism and women. And let's just do a search and pull something up.
My understanding of Conservapedia is that there are a lot of people a lot of Christians in particular, who were not satisfied with some of their articles being taken down on Wikipedia, or their edits being removed because it wasn't based on fact. It was referencing Bible or whatever. And so a number of people got together, or one person did, I'm not sure which, but they went and started their Conservapedia which is an alternative wiki that is focused on the religious conservative audience. And as you can see, Jesus Christ factors up there quite high, and prayer and things like that. So they have their own sandbox to play in, and not having to worry about things being taken down by editors who don't agree with them because they choose who the editors are. So
yeah, that was one thing I was really wondering about, because when I saw the name Conservapedia, I was thinking, oh, this is a Republican Party thing, or this is a political thing. And so I was surprised at the number of articles that had something to do with religion.
yeah,
Do you know who is behind this? Is there a particular
I don't
group
know.
that started? Okay.
I have no idea, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if you would find a lot of pro-Republican stances on here. Like there's an article about Barack Obama, and it was not kind to him. And they seem to deride the Democratic Party, so it's very divided that way. So it's pro-Christian, pro-Republican, definitely. I see that on this, and patriotism and whatnot, because those things tend to go hand in hand with that. It is interesting. They have a very long article on some famous atheists like David Silverman. They also have some terrible views on trans-sex issues, and they seem to be intent on misclassifying it as transitioning as some kind of mental illness. It's really sad the way they do that, and they consider it gender confusion, which obviously is not consistent with reality. So you can find all kinds of stuff on here. So yeah, 800 million page views is a lot. It's possible. It wouldn't surprise me, because these things can be really popular. I'm willing to take them at their word for it, because that could be the total since they've begun. I don't know how long they've been around. So.
Okay. All right. Let's try something at random and pull up a page.
Okay.
What do you know? Randolph Richardson.
Sure. Okay. I hope they spelled my name right.
They did.
I'm still seeing the homepage.
You're still seeing what?
The homepage.
Ah, okay.
So I guess it just needs a moment to catch up.
Probably. Let's see.
Make sure you're in the correct window, I guess.
Yeah, let me make sure. Let's try this.
Yeah, they do have an article about me. It is it starts off correct, and then it takes a number of dives.
Huh. Why is it not giving me? Do I have to I think I have to redo the share.
If you're sharing a screen, yeah, you're sharing a window, it should be active and live. So there we go.
Yep.
You got it.
Now I got it. Okay.
Somebody just yesterday pointed out to me that the wishful thinking category was added, and there it is.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was just added yesterday, apparently, so, or day before or something. It's just a very recent addition, so they are maintaining it.
Okay.
So, you might want to zoom up the font size. I think you can probably do that by pressing Control and the plus key on the keypad. And hold the Control key down and tap the plus key. Yeah, there you go. Hit it a few times, and then you get a bigger font that everybody can read it too. It's there you go. And then Control minus would shrink it back down. Okay. So, yeah. In case that's useful to you in the future, it's good to know these things.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Would you like me to read the entry, or would you like to read it?
You go ahead. That'll be fine.
Okay.
It is your show.
Randolf Richardson serves as the founder and president of the Canadian Atheist Organization that promotes peaceful advocacy in discourse and the concerns for rights of atheists and stopping the vilification of atheism. Oh, okay. No.
This
what
is
a horrible thing to do.
Well, this is accurate. So they start off, this is wonderful. I like how they begin with this. So I have no objection to this at all. Okay. So they get points from me on this. They got this right.
Okay. He calls himself an advocate for freedom and rights. Calls himself an advocate for freedom and rights, all of which seem consistent with his organization's slogan, True, Northern, Strong, and Free.
So interesting that they say he calls himself. That tells me that which way the article is going to go. But the slogan is correct: true, northern, strong, and free, which is based very closely on a portion of our national anthem here in Canada. The true north, strong, and free. So we just put true, northern, strong, and free, because of course it's about an organization. So there's one change of a word in there. So, yeah.
Okay. Some of his controversial advocacy is for abortion. And abortion is in blue, so I assume there's a link to their page on abortion from there.
Yeah, they're having a link to the abortion page, so which I took a look at before, and they basically equate it with murder.
Okay.
Which is not surprising for a group like this.
Right. Throughout all 3 trimesters, and he is opposed to holding pregnant women responsible for having an abortion in the name of freedom.
Okay. Yeah, I do support the freedom of choice of a person who's pregnant to choose to terminate their pregnancy at any time. I think that that's an important human right, and if we are to take human rights seriously, they need to apply to everybody, every person.
One thing I think is interesting is the lack of punctuation in that sentence, which makes it look like you are opposed to holding women responsible for having an abortion in the name of freedom.
Yeah.
How does one have an abortion in the name of freedom?
You know what? The way I look at it is it's okay, because if somebody makes that their criteria, that's fine. It's still their choice. In my opinion, and in my view, requiring somebody to justify why they're having an abortion is inappropriate and unacceptable. There should be no such requirement. It is a free choice, and as a free choice, justification is not required. It's their own body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One thing that I find interesting is, they say that you're opposed to holding pregnant women responsible, and that's not unique to you. I mean, even most conservatives and most Republicans would say, let's punish the doctors, let's punish, the abortion clinics. But it's extremely rare for anyone to say that we should punish women for having an abortion.
Actually, it didn't go Alabama, or was it Georgia, that put a law in a while ago that would put women in prison for 99 years if they had an abortion.
Wow.
Yeah, and then there was something came up in the news shortly after that happened, that was enacted, where a pregnant woman got shot in the street by another woman. And
I remember that case. Yes.
Her fetus died, and she got sentenced to 99 years, which is, it's bad enough she got shot, and then now this, like, what the heck? Imagine the stress on a person who's the victim of that, right? That would be terrible. I don't know what's happened with that case. Hopefully she's been exonerated somehow.
She has.
Okay, that's good.
That was here in Alabama.
Okay.
And a lot of people were blaming her because it was a fight between her and another woman, and she instigated the fight. She came to where the other woman worked and was picking a fight with her over something. I don't remember what it was over, but a lot of people were saying, why would you bring a baby to a fight? The fact that she was pregnant, she's bringing her unborn baby. And I'm not saying that justifies it at all, but I'm saying that was the justification that people had for why they felt that she was at fault in this, and that she wasn't a victim.
Are they expecting she'll leave the fetus at home? I have to ask. There's a way to do that, but it's not reversible.
But yes, there was so much outrage over this that the prosecutor dropped the case. It never went to trial. She was not sentenced to anything.
Excellent. That's excellent, because she's already a victim by being shot. Like, it's ridiculous that somebody. Do you know? Before I say anything here, do you know if she was acting violently to that other woman who shot her, or was it just verbal? Because if it was just verbal, there's no justification to shoot her, I would say.
It became physical.
Okay, so the other lady was probably going to claim self-defense, I guess.
Probably, yeah. But one of the things that's interesting in the case is the woman didn't shoot her directly. She shot the ground, and the bullet ricocheted off of the pavement and hit her.
So
the woman wasn't. Yeah, she wasn't trying to shoot her.
She was just trying to scare her off.
Right.
Okay. Wow. That's a part I didn't know at all. So yeah, because if she's shooting at the ground, obviously that the intention is clear not to actually shoot the other person. Yeah, that can be reasonably assumed, I would guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Where did we leave it off?
Just after the word freedom there.
Okay. His view is that this is a matter of human rights, but he's highly selective about this because he refuses to recognize the human rights of the unborn child.
So this comes up in conversations a fair bit. Those who are opposed to abortion, they will often say things like, "Oh, you say you're pro-human rights, but what about the human rights of the unborn baby or unborn child?" They use different terms like that. And a couple of things I tell them right off the bat: I'm not talking about a child or a baby. I'm talking about a fetus, a zygote, or an embryo, or something within those three trimester stages. And then the way I look at it is, this is a normal part of the human body, a normal functioning part of the human body. So this is all within the domain of the person who it is a part of. So it's up to them to choose. I don't count it as a separate person until after it's born and there's umbilical separation. So, and that's a very base general criteria. There's more to it, of course. It's a little more nuanced than that, but in general, I think that's a pretty good guideline for this, and that's where I differentiate. And so they refuse. They're very much against this argument, and they disagree with me. They start getting into saying, well, that's not consistent with biology and stuff. And then there's other people who are actually in biology who say, yes, it is. And you can see the wars on Twitter and elsewhere that go back and forth on this. So.
I had an interesting discussion on this topic with my partner in law school. We were partners for criminal or for practice court. For practice court, I went to Baylor, which is called the Trade School of Law Schools, because they have a 10-credit practice court class that is a required class. It's the only school in the country that does this. And you partner up with someone and you try cases, and you really do learn how to try cases in this course.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And one of the things that my partner and I were discussing was abortion, because I was pregnant. And I said, okay, if I graduate from law school while I'm pregnant and my fetus is a part of my body, will this baby be born with a law degree?
Oh, that's funny. I like this curveball you're throwing in there. That'd be fun to raise with these people. Yeah, they might try to use that against my arguments, though, but that's clever. Why not? Sure. Yeah.
My law partner's response was, well, yes, the fetus is a lawyer as soon as as soon as we go through graduation. But as soon as the baby is born, when they cut the umbilical cord, it severs the degree.
Yeah, it becomes a new person. Yeah.
But that kind of defeats the argument.
Yeah, that's really funny. I like that. That's hilarious. Thanks for sharing that. That's great.
Sure.
You must have a lot of interesting stories from practicing cases like that.
Actually, I did most of my work with an insurance company that insured churches, because remember, I was a very devout Christian at the time. So I do have some interesting stories about church cases, which one thing, you see all the stories about the sexual abuse.
Yeah. Terrible.
The head of the department took all of the sex cases. It was my boss handled all of the sex cases, and that's pretty much all he did was just sex claims.
Were there a lot?
Yeah, there were.
Wow, that's terrible. That's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess because he became quite skilled at handling them, that's why he ended up taking them on. And, what I've heard from police officers here years ago, when I reported some child pornography being advertised, a child pornography service being advertised from here in Canada, because I'm involved in fighting against spam and things like that. I tracked down the IP. I put all the evidence together and sent it to the RCMP, and they put it through their E division, and I didn't hear any more, which is fine. I'm okay with that. One of the officers told me that it's hard to get people to work on these cases. A lot of people don't want to, and those who do, burnout is a very common thing. It's hard for people to do this because this is. Imagine you're working on these cases. You have to pore through the details, I imagine. And it would be heart-wrenching to do that because each case is going to have unique characteristics and a lot of the same ones as well. And seeing it over and over again would probably be a really hard thing to do. You need to be, maybe I wonder if the boss was just handling those so that none of the staff would have to handle them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I need to apologize. I just, while you were talking, I went over to Twitter to send a quick note to Jenni Morgan saying, where are you, Jenni? And I realized I never hit send on the link.
Ooh,
so Jenni didn't have the link. And that's why Jenni wasn't here, because Jenni didn't have the link. And my apologies, Jenni. I forgot to hit send.
You've got it now, right?
Yes, Jenni has it now.
Excellent. Great. Looking forward to seeing you, Jenni. Mm-hmm. So that's that, I guess, could be a reason as well, that he doesn't want other people to have to endure that. And he's already done some, so he can take on the rest maybe. Do you think there might have been a factor like that as well?
Yeah. I think that the biggest factor, though, was the sensitivity. The company was concerned about being sensitive, and he had the most expertise, and so they wanted all of them handled by someone who could be sensitive about it.
They're wise to do that. So autocorrect keeps getting my name with a PH instead of an F. I see someone commenting that in the chat. And hello, Maya. I'm seeing your messages too, and I have sympathy for you having to endure that as well. So so I guess we can go on to the next part of the article if you like.
Okay, just a second.
I, in a way, I'm almost feeling like I'm getting raked over the coals, but I know I'm not because I'm in friendly territory here. But it's like, what did I do?
Okay. Let's see. He is known in atheist circles for wanting to redefine atheism by promoting it as a lack-theist position. But this hasn't been well received because most atheists don't agree with him on this definition and regularly argue with him about it, especially in Twitter fights.
So I'm not redefining it. I'm going with what it's known as. There are some people who disagree. In my experience, most people don't. Most people are okay with it. And there's people who use the word in different ways. The base fundamental is what I adhere to with it, and that is just not believing in any deities, any goddesses or gods. And if you take a look at all the different ways, hello, Jenni, if you look at all the different ways that people use the word atheism or the word atheist, they all include the base fundamental of non-belief in deities. So there are some people who prefer to put more on it, and people are free to use words however they like. But when they're talking to most people, this is how I find it's generally understood, not just on the internet, but also in real life. Running Canadian Atheists, most of our members we've had no complaints from any of our members on our promotion of what it means. So.
Maya says, quite a few people agree with you. Theists hate it because they can't handle the lack-theist position.
Yeah, Maya, I agree with you. That's kind of what I've noticed. I would be, but this is, of course, anecdotal on my part because this is my own experience. I think it's important to point this out. The the word lacktheist I object to, because the person who, at least he takes credit for coining it, I suspect he probably did, was one time he was talking about how he uses the word lacktheist to poke and prod at atheists and cause some problems for us, or use it sarcastically or something. So it's obviously has a negative connotation right from the get-go. And, it's like, we already have a word that works, so I'll just stick with that. Thank you very much. But I would like to know where Conservapedia comes up with the idea that most people disagree with this. I'd love to see some statistics on this, which I noticed that they don't provide.
Okay. Despite everyone's best efforts to educate him in real-world philosophy or even with dictionaries, he always dismisses the primary doctrine that there is no God definition that is widely accepted and commonly used by professional philosophers from all walks of life. His usual defenses of lacktheist definition mostly rely on the etymological fallacy, which is a genetic fallacy that holds that the present-day meaning of a word should be the same as its historical meaning.
Okay, so firstly, I'm not a professional philosopher, but what I do know in researching this is that this term, this idea of God's not existing, taking that belief position, is typically bandied around in a subset of philosophy called a subdiscipline of philosophy called philosophy of religion, which is mostly catered to by theologians and theocrats, some of whom seem to have some pretty strong views against atheists and against atheism. So it's not really surprising that it comes through that way. So I think it's specific to that area, because in general philosophy, my impression from what I've read is religion and philosophy don't really come up all that often, because there's so many different areas to cover. There's ethics, there's philosophy of science, there's philosophy of this, philosophy of that, a lot of different areas. And so it gets to be quite broad. So
J. Mike wants you to run for president of the United States.
He's not the first person to say that to me, and I appreciate it. Thank you. But I do value my life as private as it is, and not being an American would probably disqualify me anyway. So.
Well, I'd like to see the Canadians just simply invade the United States and take over our government for us.
If we did that, I suppose that if the U.S. called out to other countries and said, help, we're being invaded. And they're like, by who? By Canada. Ha ha ha, yeah, you're joking, hang up. We'd probably be able to take over quite a few countries before the world caught on. We're not known for this kind of thing. So yeah, invasion's not our thing. But yep. That's another thing that's come up quite a few times, is people wanting that. I think one of the big draws for the Canadian way is that we have socialized medicine, and wow, J. Mike, I'm flattered. Thank you, J. Mike. I really appreciate that. Nicholas Lamar Suter, sorry, what's he saying there?
He said, wait, Randolph isn't a professional philosopher, so what? He shouldn't use the terminology? I'm not an airline pilot, but I speak like one.
Oh boy. Okay. Thanks, Nicholas. Yeah. So the rest of the article, I guess, if you, I'm not trying to rush you along or anything, but I know Jenni's here, and
yeah. Okay. So next we have, in some debates with Christians, some of which are posted on his YouTube channel, which, by the way, his YouTube channel is linked in the chat if you want to check it out. Randolph also denies that objective morals come from God, and he relies on trickery to convince his audiences that God is unnecessary, even in his own country of Canada, which, of course, is a Christian country, according to the Canadian Constitution, which states Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law.
I love how they boldface that one part. Trickery. No, I'm not using trickery. But that preamble that they quoted from our Charter of Rights and Freedoms is correct. It's there, but it's a preamble. It is not one of the numbered points in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And the very first, the second section, Section 2, describes all the freedoms that we have protected here, including freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, and other sorts of freedoms. So this, of course, I can easily argue that saying freedom of religion is obviously not recognizing the supremacy of God in that case.
Okay.
I saw Purple Rhymes with Orange mentioning they're trying to get annexed here.
Yeah, at least take Minnesota. Yeah, actually, that was a question on my constitutional law final. Was it was a hypothetical situation. Suppose a document was found that there was a mistake made when they drew the border between the United States and Canada, and actually it belonged, and they had a map there showing so that Washington, Oregon, Montana, Idaho, North and South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, yeah, all of those states, those all belong to Canada. Discuss the constitutional conflicts and issues that would be as a result if we discovered that this was a mistake that was made.
Oh, godless granny, please do make a video about this someday. I think it would be a winner. I think this would be a popular video.
Yeah, that was on my constitutional law final.
Oh, you should review that and make a video on that someday. That would be really, really interesting to a lot of people, I think. Canadians and Americans alike. And you'd probably get a lot of feedback, some good, some not so good, a few that are downright rude, I imagine. But
it makes me want a doobie.
Yeah, well, come to Canada. It's legal here. Loki Vaz writing, Latvia sounds like a smear, like topless, to imply violation of top-free equality rights is somehow a failing on the victim of oppression. That's a salient point, because here in Canada, and I agree, it is a smear. In Canada, there have been 3 cases in different provinces. One in my province. I think mine might have been the first province where it happened, but they have. There was a woman on the beach, and she was topless, just a regular beach. And she got arrested by police and got charged with public indecency or something. And so she responded with a Charter of Rights challenge, which we call a charter challenge, a constitutional challenge, because the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is part of our Constitution since 1982. And the judges at the Supreme Court ruled that because of Section 15, which is non-discrimination, that this would qualify as sexual discrimination, so the charges are dropped. And it has now been tested in 3 different provinces, and the same result every time, that women are free to go topless in Canada just as much as men are, which is as much as we want. So, although, and then I remember at the time there was controversy, people calling into news programs and talking about, oh, if you allow this, there's going to be all these topless women walking around, and I haven't seen that. We see it at the Pride Parade, but it hasn't been happening. And the beaches, you almost never see it. So it really hasn't changed anything. The culture still remains the same. So it's just, there are people worried about nothing. Mm-hmm. And although I don't even think it's something to worry about. Do you want to just read the whole last section?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. Just read the last section. Wishful
I enjoyed
thinking.
going through this with you. This is fun.
Does Randolph secretly believe in God or wish that God is real? God obviously is real.
I'll just note this is a section called wishful thinking. I think it's their thinking actually, but
In a 27 March 21 debate on whether atheism is the rational conclusion of skepticism, Randolph told his opponent, John Maddox, who wiped the floor with him from the very beginning by destroying his lack-theist position with academic clarity, that he wants to be God. And then Randolph used his trickery to hide his arrogance and what is obviously a deep-seated belief in God. Poor Randolph. He says he's an atheist when he might not even realize he believes in God.
Oh,
In
the
a short,
condescension is peak.
yeah. In a short and sweet debate review, S.J. Thomason exposed Randolph's deception about his wishful thinking to become God, which is extremely egotistical of him.
So what they're referring to here is this is correct. We debated on this stuff. I was asked by John Maddox, my interlocutor, what it would take to prove to me that God is real. So I asked him, how about the Christian God, since he's a Christian? So, okay. And I said, well, since that Christian God has all these different omni characteristics, such as he's omni-chronological, timeless, or in all parts of time. I mean, omnipresent, he's everywhere, omni-powerful, that's omnipotence, and there's omniscience, because he knows everything, and other omnis. I said, all I would need is for your God to grant me omniscience and omnipotence for a period of a fortnight, for 2 weeks, so that I could experiment with this and verify for myself that this is all real. And his response immediately was, oh, so you want to be God? I said, no, I'm not asking for all the omnis. I'm only asking for those two. Yeah, so there's technicalities, right? But then some people are asking, why would you want both of those? Wouldn't omnipotence be enough? And I said, well, perhaps it would, but I would also want the omniscience as a safeguard to make sure that I don't cause problems with that omnipotence. So, yeah. Anyways, S.J. Thomason did a quick review video where she was laughing about it. She seemed to think it was one of the funniest things she's ever heard. So, Maya Atchison was writing something.
Yeah, I was putting up her comment that Christians are silly. I'm still waiting for people to try to marry their dogs in toaster ovens now that gay marriage is legal.
That's a bit of satire there, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was pretty much the claim, that if we allowed gay people to get married, next thing you knew, people were going to want to marry anything. You know, if a man can marry a man, he can marry whatever.
So I just want to say thank you to Conservapedia for putting up an article about me, even though it's not entirely correct and has some agenda stuff sewn into it and a few points that are completely wrong. But it started off well, and I did take a look at some other things on Conservapedia today before joining you, and they seem to have some very horrible ideas about trans people, and it's awful. They think trans people, there's mental illness or something like that, and it's just terrible. So,
and here it is.
That's one such article right there. Yeah.
Yep. According to
into what Jenny's going to talk about.
I was completely unaware of Conservapedia until this show came up and asked me to be on it, and so I dashed out right away and checked it out, and found myself in this rabbit hole for about 3 hours reading all this crap.
That's a good word for it.
This everything I read, and I'm going to presume that the entire website or document is the same, is nothing more than, decades and decades worth of Republican right-wing conservative religious zealot bullshit that they've been fantasizing to be true for forever. None of it's true. it's inaccurate. It's referenced poorly. It's cherry picked. There's just nothing I can say positive about it at all.
Yeah, it is terrible. Yeah, I felt really sad reading the article. I didn't read the whole thing. I only read part of it, what Godless Granny brought up. It's just, it makes me feel sick seeing that there are people who think that's true,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, you
Oh.
didn't interrupt at all. We were springboarding to bring you in. But I will go ahead and start with their entry on gender confusion, which is gender confusion or gender dysphoria is the problematic state of not reading. Oh, I'm sorry, is of not realizing or finding it difficult to accept what gender a person is. It is common among people who choose not to adhere to traditional gender roles, such as homosexuals, transsexuals, transvestites, and cross dressers. Parents must make the roles of mother, females, and father, males, very clear so that children can learn and affirm that there are differences between boys and girls. Under good parenting, the children will not become confused about gender. The fact is, there are two genders, male and female, based on one's biological sex is affirmed through scripture. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them.
It's pretty discriminatory. That's wicked writing here.
I'm sad that my parents are dead, so I can't go up to them now and explain to them that in my 1950s parents, my dad, who was a Marine, and my mom, who was a nurse, needed to explain gender roles better to me.
Boy, they'd be shocked today.
Yeah, well, they seemed to have it pretty clear in their heads what gender roles were, and no matter what they said, it didn't change my attitude about myself. This is again an opinion written by people who have hate in their heart and want to see us eliminated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which kind of springboards to one thing that I was going to talk about, which was the Alabama transgender bill. I don't know if I said this on stream or just talked about it with some people privately, but the Alabama transgender bill died a natural death. It was passed in the Alabama Senate, but when it came up in the House, they never got to it. And they adjourned for their summer break without having ever reached it. And so the bill is dead. Unfortunately, I have read that Shelnut, the state senator that introduced the bill in the first place, is planning to reintroduce the bill in January of 2022, and he's going to try again. So I sent him a letter asking why he wants us to leave the state.
Oh.
That sounds like a good approach.
Mm-hmm.
Had a response yet?
No, I just sent the letter this morning, so he hasn't had a chance to respond yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was rather strong in that letter saying, Arkansas recognized that children are already receiving this kind of treatment, and if they want to continue to do so, their only option is to flee the state. I said, is that what your goal is to get all transgender people to flee the state?
Good for pushing that.
I would think his answer to that would be yes.
Yeah, except he can't really say that.
Well, then he's not much of a man, is he? And I hope he's listening, because I'd love to say it to his face.
There we go. We'll see. That's going to make for a good response. Now, I did put a few things in that letter that were just slightly misleading. Is I mentioned that I'm transparent, but I didn't mention that my son is an adult. I left the implication that my son was a child, and that this was going to
transparent, just as you're a transparent. That's it.
Right, but because I was talking about medical care for children, it implied that this was going to affect me directly, even though it's not going to affect me directly. It's only going to affect me indirectly because my child is an adult.
Your emotion should be direct still. I'd use that.
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you said is accurate. It affects you directly. It's your son. So.
Yep.
Now, I forget, what was it, a few days ago, I had mentioned to you that a judge had decided against or threw somebody's law out.
Yeah, it was Virginia.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I went and found a few things. Let's see.
Was that a federal judge?
There, I'll bring it up and I've got that article on Politico. And so I will pull that up. If you guys want to talk for just a bit, it'll take me a bit to I'm a little slow yet.
So,
knowing you, we're certainly not best friends, but I know you a little bit better than the guy who wrote the article in Conservapedia. I just laughed all the way through it. It's so funny.
the gender confusion article?
No, the one on you.
Oh yeah, me too. I laugh at it too. I've laughed at it so many times. I'm more serious in my response now. But yeah, I'm delighted that somebody noticed me.
Okay, I got it up now.
It was a good one, definitely. Judge halts West Virginia law targeting transgender athletes. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 14-year-old
11-year-old.
11-year-old.
Okay.
Maybe you can zoom it up a bit. 11-year-old. Thank you. 11-year-old Becky Pepper Jackson, a soon-to-be
Middle schooler.
Okay, it's not coming. It's a little fuzzy on my end.
Yeah.
Looking to try out for, but schools.
Her school's girls cross country team.
You better read it because it's a little fuzzy for me. I'm trying to read it for you.
That's okay. A federal judge decided Wednesday to temporarily block a West Virginia law that bars transgender women and girls from participating in school sports teams that match their gender identity. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 11-year-old Becky Pepper Jackson, a soon-to-be middle schooler, looking to try out for her school's girls cross-country team. Lawyers on behalf of Pepper Jackson argued that the West Virginia law discriminates on the basis of sex and the transgender status, violating both the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and Title IX, a federal education law that prevents sex-based discrimination. While this case is pending, defendants are enjoined from enforcing Section 18225D against her. Judge Goodwin wrote, she will be permitted to sign up for and participate in school athletics in the same way as her girl classmates. They asked the judge for a preliminary injunction because the cross-country team practices start this month. The law took effect July 1st. The principal of Bridgeport Middle School, where Pepper Jackson will be attending, told the girl's mother in May that the law would bar her from participating on the girls' team in the fall. I'm excited to know that I will be able to try out for the girls' cross-country team and follow in the running shoes of my family, Pepper Jackson said. It hurt that the state of West Virginia would try to block me from pursuing my dreams. I just want to play. Key context. The West Virginia's laws is the first such set of restrictions on transgender athletes to be paused this year while legal challenges are ongoing. Idaho, the first state in the nation to have such a law, has also had its statute tied up in court for the past year. New laws barring transgender girls and women from playing on teams that match their gender identity took effect in several states: Mississippi, Montana, Florida, West Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Alabama all signed transgender athlete restrictions this year. Backers of these laws have pointed to a January executive order from President Joe Biden that aimed to promote inclusion for transgender people, saying this order made new restrictions necessary. The White House has argued a Supreme Court ruling on LGBTQ rights in the workplace also extends to Title IX. The Education Department has since issued a new interpretation of the law that includes prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Should I finish reading the article, or you want to talk about the?
I think I got enough.
Okay.
It's important to keep in mind that I don't believe the people who are promoting all of this expect every one of these laws to pass in every one of the jurisdictions. The purpose of the laws are not necessarily to be passed and to give help to trans people, although they certainly will do that if they're passed. But it's also to just create the atmosphere of fear and paranoia about trans people and how dangerous they are to society or to you as an individual or you as a woman in a bathroom or anything like that.
Do you think they would be disappointed if all those laws passed that they proposed?
No, I don't think they'd be.
So I think the intention is still there, and it's reasonable to assume that that's their intention.
Sure, that is, but they also know damn well that just having the argument out there is aiding their bid for an election in 2022. They want all this to. They know that this is all going to extend into that election period.
Partly election strategy, then, yeah.
Sure, and they're trying to use this exactly as they used the gay marriage issue back in the 90s and the early 2000s. There's just no doubt. The pattern is clear that they're doing the exact same thing all over again.
Loki Va has a question that I think you will be happy to answer for them. Isn't birth sex-based athletic segregation reasonable to the extent any sex-based sports teams are? Conversely, if not, how is any sex segregation in sports valid?
Well, I guess, and that's certainly a bunch of controversy about it. Now, many of us are going to feel differently than each other, and I think we have to understand that we're in an argument phase right here these days, and that to make judgments or hate calls at each other because of how we believe at this point is counterproductive, whichever side you're on. I think that for many sports, it is absolutely sensible. I didn't say right, I said sensible, to have women's sports and men's sports. Okay. I think that within that, if women are choosing to involve themselves in the men's end of those sports, that they are welcome to attempt it. Okay, and if they have the medal, they'll make it, and that'll be just fine. But I think there's a lot of situations that women could be seriously injured if they're going to try to compete with men and are not prepared properly for it. I mean, you know, visualize rugby. If you ever watch rugby, I think that's definitely one of those sports. You know, professional football is one of those sports. Is baseball? No. Is volleyball? No. Cross country, track, all that? No.
Yes.
Swimming? No. But some of the sports that deal with mass, speed, and damage, by design, I think should be segregated unless the woman chooses to go into the male competition area.
Yeah.
And
because if they're prepared, and that's the key that you said, if they properly prepared for it, then they're definitely capable of being a part of it. Yeah.
I found one article about a state, and I don't remember which state it was. I could look for it if we want to pull it up, but I think we can discuss it without pulling up the article, where it has completely backfired because there is a trans young man in high school wrestling that has been told that he must wrestle with the girls. And he is so much bigger than the girls. He has so much more muscle than the girls, and he's beating all of the girls. But they're telling him he can't compete with the boys. He has to compete with the girls.
Yeah. which is just the sports participation version of the bathroom bills that said, no, you can't have any of these trans women in women's bathrooms. But then the trans men who are big and burly and have F on their birth certificate are going to be in the women's rooms.
So the bathroom bill stuff seems very bizarre to me, because in people's homes, we don't have separate men's and women's washrooms. They're shared. On airplanes and buses, they don't have separate washrooms for men and women. It's not like this is a new concept. It's just the only difference is that there's more than one stall in them now, I think. So I really don't think it should be as big a shock as people think it is.
Vesta Freya says hockey depends on the woman.
I actually know more women who play amateur hockey than men.
Mm.
So if they want to play hockey, they should.
And
When I
purple,
was in high school, there was one girl there who was playing hockey. It was all boys, so she played and she held her own just fine. They wanted her on their teams just like any of the boys. It was fine, no problem. She loved hockey. She played it all the time, and she was good at it.
Now, when you try to take this argument from the just generalized segregation of anybody, regardless of sport, regardless of gender, okay, my opinion is yes. You know, and I named certain exceptions, a couple more, like auto racing. No, of course there shouldn't be a difference. In that golf, no, why should there be a difference? Although some do say that women cannot drive as far as men because of their height, and there's a certain amount.
Or in Saudi Arabia, they say because it'll damage their ovaries. Yeah.
Oh, is that what? Okay.
Yeah, that's their justification for women not driving, which they've since lifted apparently. But
yeah, well, it must
now they claim that they're such an open society because they've lifted this banishment that they put in.
No, I was driving in golf. I was referring to.
Wrong kind of driving. Oops.
You know, if you got somebody who's 5'6" and they're swinging a golf club, their club is going to be coming past slower than the person who is 6'6", and club at the same speed of pivot. Because it's further out, it's going to be having to travel faster to make that same distance. So they do have a little bit of an advantage there. But I've also seen women outdrive lots and lots of men too. So yeah, they should be allowed to play, and they have. There have been trials where women have chosen to compete in the PGA, and they've done that. So
you know, a few years ago here on CBC Radio, our national government-run radio station, there's no advertising on. They're very much investigative journalists. They're actually quite good, and they're better at being objective, I find, than a lot of the private stations. But they had they were talking about people in medicine, and they're talking about how a lot of the medications and other therapies are mostly studied on men. So a lot of the medications don't work as reliably on women. And so here in Canada, there's an initiative to try to change that and open up the research so that it's not gender biased. And this is good that they're doing this now. It would have been nice if they started this back in the 1950s, but especially at a time when they're saying there's a distinct difference in men and women. Like, why didn't it occur to anybody then that you better do the research different on both, you know? So
Lone Wanderer says women can drive in Saudi Arabia, and they were able to during the Saudi war and in other situations. Don't believe the media. I thought one thing that was interesting that Robin found was there was a claim back when passenger trains were first invented. They didn't allow women to ride on the passenger trains because some idiot scientist came up with the idea that if a woman's body went more than 25 miles an hour, it would damage her uterus.
Boy, they'd be.
Uh-oh.
Oh, it's Randolph that's frozen, not me. Okay, I'm sure he'll be back in a moment or two.
Okay, yeah, I froze here too, so maybe I'll get bumped off too.
You froze, Randolph. We didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I was jokingly saying that whoever that scientist was would be shocked today to see Danica Patrick racing along at high school.
Yeah, that's some of the women in the Air Force.
Even better example. Yeah, they're going even faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
But you know, they also said that about Chuck Yeager before he broke the Mach barrier. They said that no, a person, they didn't even say man or woman, although I'm sure they said a man can't go faster than Mach 1 because they'll die. And so those things have always been around, and which isn't forgiving. And it's just that we tend to do that all the time. These silly things, you know.
Vesta Freja made an interesting comment there about using the men's washroom to avoid lineups.
Yeah, I have done that myself.
And it's I've seen women in the men's rooms before, and they're just avoiding the lineups, and it's
Mhm.
fine. Nobody's objecting. Everyone's going into their private stalls anyway. It doesn't matter. But and then when I saw that, it had me wondering, why do we really need to separate these things? Like it really shouldn't be necessary. But there was a television show called Ally McBeal where they had a washroom for men and women together, and they didn't have separate washrooms, and some of the drama played out in the washroom. So a few awkward moments came up with hints at romance and stuff. The washroom's not the place where that's going to happen, but that's TV for you.
That was a fun show.
It was a fun
couple
show.
seasons.
Yeah,
Um,
it was well done.
when we take a youngster, let's say a 12-year-old, who's, let's see, 12 would be what, 6th grade? Okay, let's say a 13-year-old, 14-year-old in junior high school, and they want to go compete, and they're a transgender girl. What does that mean? Okay, people won't say, well, what does that mean? And they're absolutely convinced that this is a boy going out there. Well, no, it's a transgender girl. And what that means is that if they're in treatment, they're very likely either not producing any testosterone because they're so damn young, and so therefore are equal to a girl in terms of strength based on testosterone, or they are in treatment and they are receiving blockers which are preventing their body from producing testosterone, and so therefore they are equal to a girl in terms of testosterone strength. Because as we all know, women have testosterone and estrogen in them, and so do men.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Different levels, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All different levels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know this stuff I'm asking. Is it in general it's different levels, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the balance between the two that makes the difference.
Okay.
The reality is then that as this child gets older and they continue to be on these blockers, their body is not going to, hopefully, will not be going into the what many term, and myself included, as the toxicity of male puberty, where they're not going to grow this muscular structure, where they're not going to grow these broader shoulders, where they're not going to certainly grow their pubic areas with any kind of size. They're not going to necessarily gain a huge amount of height. They may, but they may not. Estrogen, by the way, is one of the drugs that stops the growth plates in the human body. That when a girl hits puberty and testosterone starts to flow, or estrogen starts to flow, their growth plates stop. Okay, and they do not grow any taller and stuff like that. And the same thing can happen to the transgender kid. So there's really just a whole bunch of evidence that shows that these kids do not have some sort of advantage. And what's going on in the discussions and arguments is that this science is being denied. It is being questioned by people who will quote this source or that source. And when you look back on these sources, you will oftentimes find that they are people who have a doctorate from some religious school that pretty much has a shopping center storefront, and hands out PhDs for whatever money that you will spend on them. So they're not legitimate science. They're just not. And if you look at the legitimate science, the people are actually at universities and accredited schools, you'll find that the truth is that these kids are just the same, and they should be allowed to compete. And then when this kid finally hits 16, which has been decided the magic number when somebody would be allowed to have hormones for the first time, and they start taking them, they rapidly develop into the female form as any girl at that age would when she starts puberty. Although most girls start puberty much earlier than that. And so again, there is no comparison to them having an advantage. In the Olympics recently, and I'm not going to talk about the one transgender person that's in the Olympics right now, but in the Olympics and in AAU and other world competition, there's a number of cis women who have been removed from sports or banned from being allowed to compete because their testosterone level is too high.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they are cis
ridiculous, isn't
it? And they have perfectly functioning female organs, and they have estrogen, and they have ovaries, and they have big hips, and they have an F on their birth certificate, but they have a higher level of testosterone, and it has helped them grow maybe a little bit stronger than the next woman. But it's important to realize that this is a continuum, that people will have all different levels of testosterone and estrogen in them. At what point do you draw the line and say this is too high and this is okay? We don't know that. That science does not exist. And so these women have been discriminated against and tossed out of their sports unfairly. In the high school level, there have been court cases where parents have sued the school systems because a transgender kid beat their daughter
Mm-hmm.
at a race, some sort of foot race, track race. But when they present this information, they do not mention that the next week their daughter won and kicked the shit out of the transgender kid.
Right. Right.
So it's just, again, an example of how they distort the truth and how they are intentionally lying.
They're selective about what they choose to share.
Oh, way.
Yeah, Shellnut, the one that has sponsored the anti-trans bill here in Alabama, his big thing is protecting children from surgery that they are too young to choose. But there is no transgender surgery in children. And
So it won't matter.
right, it doesn't. But he
We'll get him his
uses
votes,
that to
though.
scare people. You know, he tries to tell people that, hey, we need to protect children from making these bad decisions that are life altering. And he just kind of leaves out of it that nobody actually does this.
So my understanding is that it's not a quick overnight process. This is a process that takes a long time. So it's not like somebody can make a snap decision and then start the process tomorrow. There's a lot of planning and preparation goes into it, and other factors too. Am I right?
It takes an adult a long time to complete the process. A kid takes even longer. It takes her entire adolescence.
Wow. Yeah.
It doesn't happen in a year or 2 or 3.
And I understand one of the early stages
5,
is
6,
puberty.
7, 8 years.
One of the early stages is puberty blockers, and if they decide they don't want to go through, they just stop the puberty blockers.
Exactly.
Normal. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So this is ridiculous, this bill.
Now they will also make the pronouncement that, well, these puberty blockers are untested and this is not what they're intended for.
Untested?
Yes.
They're not peer reviewed? Really?
Well,
on an off-brand basis, but they have been used before for this purpose in many, many cases. For example, in certain cancers, they want to stop the flow of hormones, whether it's a child or an adult, and they will load them up on these blockers, so that particular hormone, testosterone in this case,
And hopefully the cancer dies away.
does not keep contributing to the cancer. And then when the person is off of it, everything goes back to normal.
I asked my brother. I asked my brother about this because he's a pharmacist. The claim that puberty blockers are an off-brand, using them to stop puberty in transgender children is an off-brand use, and he said 80% of pharmaceuticals are used for off-brand use.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What does off-brand use mean?
Okay. Somebody develops a drug for a particular purpose, and this is the way he explained it to me. And when you are testing a drug, you list any side effects that any of the patients that are involved in the trials report to you. And when you find some consistency, then you conclude that this is a result of the drug. Well,
Okay.
doctors that are looking for a drug to do something and there isn't one on the market for it will look at some of these side effects of other drugs and say, I might be able to use this for this purpose.
Wow.
Viagra was developed as I can't remember if it was a
Blood
beta
thinner.
blocker, but it was a blood thinner, right?
I think it was a beta blocker.
Use of Viagra as an ED is an off-brand use of the medication because that's not what it was developed for.
So off-brand use
Which
basically just means unintended use.
Which,
Not
by
necessarily
the way,
unintended, but not the original intention of what the drug was originally made for.
Okay.
which, by the way, insurance will pay for men having Viagra, but it won't pay for transgender kids to have their treatment. Huh? Could that be sexism? Don't know.
Most definitely, that could definitely be sexual discrimination. Of course, they won't let either male or female transgender kids have them. So I don't know. Maybe
That's true.
maybe that's what they use. But anyway, actually, Lokiva has corrected me. It's off-label, not off-brand. Yeah, I'm sorry. I misspoke.
Thanks for the correction.
Mhm.
Yep. Thank you.
But yeah, most drugs are used for off-label use, and so the whole claim that puberty blockers being used in transgender children is an off-label use. Yeah, but so what?
Yeah. Yeah, there's even a poison can be used to help people if it's used properly.
Well, yeah, it is. Belladonna. It's in your cold medications.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Much of it will kill you, though.
Yeah, you get too much of anything. Yeah, but the drugs can do a lot with a lot less of too much of anything. Viagra patents are a mess, according to Lokiva, along with Cialis and the dirty tricks drug companies used to try to extend patents. Oh yeah.
So when we run into sources like Conservapedia, it is absolutely critical to understand that these are not written based on facts. They are written based on religion, or they're written based on opinion. That truth is not guaranteed at all.
Well, they're kind of anonymous. We don't know who writes them. Like, you can look on the history and see the pseudonym that they use, but it really doesn't tell you too much.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Wikipedia has its questions that people offer towards their content as well.
Yeah,
But
Wikipedia suffers from the same problem. So does Rational Wiki and others like it. Yeah.
They will be more than happy to show you their flow of submissions, corrections, timeline it. Who are these people? They vet their contributors, and it's just not a comparison. Just not a comparison at all.
I want to discuss this comment because it has a rather amusing typo in it. Purity blockers. Vesta, we are not laughing at you. I realize that it's just a typo, but it is hilarious. I had the opposite problem. When I was 16 when I had my first period. To balance it out, my last period was 2 months short of 60.
This reminds me of something that you showed me earlier. Somebody had written semester instead of trimester.
Yes. There was. Do you want me to bring that up? I've got that
sure.
somewhere on my desktop.
That's such a fun read.
While you're digging that up, another blocker use is that's well known as for precocious puberty, where you will get like a young girl who's maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, who begins to go into full-blown puberty and menstruation and that sort of thing. They want to stop that because I don't know the science. I can't explain.
Isn't that what circumcision's supposed to be for?
But they don't believe that it's good for the child's body to have that kind of puberty that young. And so the goal is to stop that, and the puberty blockers do that.
This is a tweet that was sent to me when in response to me posting this show tonight. When this person saw that Randolf Richardson was going to be on it, the response was, "Does he believe in abortion through all 3 semesters? Really?"
Yes, I do. Because I'm assuming a semester is a bit shorter than a trimester. But
Depends on whether or not they're going to graduate,
I love these times. We know they mean trimester, but these things are funny. I could be autocorrect, but
how many credits do they get for that course?
hopefully all 9 months of them. Yeah.
Oh my God. How's the chat doing as we're talking about this? You guys coming up with any questions or anything?
I imagine they're having some fun. Yeah.
There haven't been a whole lot of comments. This is the next one. Belladonna alkaloids disappeared from over-the-shelf or over-the-counter sinus drugs decades ago, but are still used in some surgical prep as strong drying agents. Zyrtec has become the strongest common sinus dryer.
Well, thank you for that correction. I did not realize that they stopped the belladonna alkaloids. And if you have datura plants or let's see, devil's.
And a semester is a half a year, so longer.
If a pregnancy goes much longer than 9 months, then that can be a serious problem. So hopefully that doesn't happen.
Go ahead and finish, Jenny.
Sorry.
I was just going to mention, since belladonna was up again, if you have a plant in your yard called datura, which is a beautiful white trumpet-like flower, don't let anything eat it. It's just pure belladonna alkaloids, and it will do you in.
Oh.
Loki points out Roe v. Wade was bad case law. Randolph is accused of challenging that, but moment of birth reflects U.S. 14th Amendment and First Amendment versus Roe based on Fourth Amendment messy BS.
I'd like to know what part of of Roe and Wade that I'm challenging.
Well, Roe v. Wade would have abortion prohibited in the third trimester entirely. And so I think their position is that since you would accept abortion in any trimester, that would be my read on it.
But wasn't the outcome of Roe and Wade to be pro-abortion all the way through, or
no? It was not. Roe v. Wade was what gave us the trimester system, and abortion was to be free in the first trimester. It was to be. There were some restrictions in the second trimester, and I don't remember exactly what they were. But the third trimester was only for the life of the mother or for rape or incest.
Yeah, and to me, that's relegating pregnant people to become slaves, and that's bringing back slavery, and that's my view on it. And some people think that's harsh. I think slavery is harsh, forcing people to do things that they don't want to do, especially things like that can easily be brought to an end, is, to me, a violation of human rights.
Jenny, did you have any other legislation or court cases that you wanted us to discuss?
Sorry, I hope I didn't silence the whole conversation there with that point.
No,
not really.
The only one I've been vaguely familiar with right now is Wisconsin, and that's because it's next door here in my home state. That they have their group of anti-trans bills, and that's what I'm calling them. I'm not calling them athletic bills or bathroom bills. They're anti-trans bills. Period. Mm-hmm. I know I've said it on other presentations. The people who wrote these laws are not the legislators. The people who wrote these laws are religious extremists from Focus on Family and the Family Research Council. Okay, mm-hmm. These two groups are notoriously anti-LGBT to the point where some of their members even suggest the extermination of us from the planet, like that'll stop us from existing.
That's akin to genocide.
So the next people are born tomorrow. So
that's akin to genocide.
It's just important to realize where these bills came from. They did not come from legislators. They did not come from constituents saying, "Hey, we need to do this." This mm-hmm. purely the dog wagging the tail wagging the dog here.
Mhm.
We have.
These are bills in search of a problem.
It's unfortunate that it's almost like they're creating a non-problem. They're addressing a non-problem. They're unfortunately here in Canada, it's not all just roses here either. We have people in government. We have a party called the Progressive Conservatives, which sounds like an oxymoron. Yeah, you're laughing because you hear it right away. I laugh at it too, but they ran things for quite a while here, and they shut down a whole bunch of social programs and programs that are pro-science and women's advocacy groups. They took funding away from things like that, and they really made it really bad for society here. So now we have currently a liberal government, the Liberal Party, they're called, at the federal level, and they've been undoing a lot of those things, but the Conservatives are still kind of pushing for things that do seem suspiciously anti-trans and anti-abortion. There's a certain bigoted crowd that get attracted to that party because of their right-wing religious leanings that fit right in with quite a bit of the stuff that you see in Conservapedia. So they last time they put up a signal at the most recent election, the Conservative Party did that. Their leader said they won't be putting legislation through for anti-abortion, but they're not closed to hearing people propose things about it, which sent a really strong message to the religious groups that, hey, we're open to hearing your ideas on this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure that's how the religious groups would read it, the ones that are very staunchly against transgender stuff and against abortion stuff. And they tend to wrap all that stuff in together here.
Yeah.
The other thing I guess I'd like people to be aware of in this is nothing to do with the laws. It has nothing to do with the legislatures. It has to do 100% with the media. Media in their scramble and false beliefs that fair and balanced means to listen to the science, but then also listen to the cranks on the other side.
Yeah.
No matter how few they are or how inaccurate their information,
Yep.
to give a platform is hurting us a great deal. Okay, the right wing knows that the media will favor them, even though they are cranks and inaccurate, and they're using that against us. In England right now, the BBC and the Daily Mail, which are two of the largest media outlets of the country, are both absolutely anti-trans. And in none of their articles do they ever discuss science with either trans people or people who are actually in the treatment of trans individuals. And that's what is beginning to happen here, too. Surprise, surprise, considering the Heritage Foundation is funding both sides of the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the good news is on CBC here, our government radio station, I do hear them frequently covering trans issues, and they talk about the people who are against it and the people who are for it, and they frame them together in the same thing, and they're usually giving the preference toward the trans people. So I'm glad to hear that happening, because you hear the other people, they're kind of nuts, and they're mandated as a government agency to strive to be objective as much as possible. So that's why that happens here. But the private ones, I don't really hear this happen that much on it, unless it's something big. Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention about the Progressive Conservative Party, when they come to the Pride parades, and they've done that in the last few years, that Pride parades happened, when their float is coming along, or their group is walking along, the crowd just quiets down and stops cheering until they've passed. And one year,
That's interesting.
the first year they were out, people threw garbage at them. Now, I'm not in favor of throwing garbage, but yelling and nasty things at them, okay, freedom of.
I'd like to see everybody turn their backs on them.
That would be a good trend to start. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be a nice passive approach.
The point I wanted to make about the media discussion is that as consumers of media out there in YouTube land, stay on top of your media. Don't let them get away with this crap. Write them letters, write them emails, make Twitter comments on both their Twitter pages and your own. Don't let them distort the image by giving platform to the cranks more than the people who actually have the science behind them on this. Don't let them get away with calling what the other side is doing science, because it is not. Okay. We need your help badly in this, all you cis people. This is just critically important. They are winning this fight because they are very well organized. There's no head transgender person. There's no transgender organization. We're just a bunch of individuals who are getting beat up, and I mean that literally. Help, please help.
I will add to that one thing. If you can write a handwritten letter, that will be more effective, because when these agencies receive a handwritten letter over an email, they tend to regard that as representing more people, more voices. And if you can't do handwritten, at least do email, and make it long and make it well thought out.
Or write it like an email, but print it out, sign it, and send it U.S. snail.
That works too. Yeah, that works just as well as a handwritten letter. Although a handwritten letter still will count as more. But whatever the best you can do, that would be the preference. If you can make a choice, choose that.
I'd like to briefly discuss what Loki has brought up, which is the Gavin Grimm case. Loki says, with the Gavin Grimm case out now, what about ending the bias in simply pretending gender exists as binaries? And obviously Loki is right. The Gavin Grimm case, if you're not familiar with it, was decided fairly recently and was a really good decision. The court decided that it was unconstitutional. It was discrimination for the school to say that Gavin had to use either the female restroom or the only gender-neutral restroom in the entire school, which was inside the nurse's office. Now, Gavin actually had graduated from high school a few years ago. That's one of the problems with court cases. They take years to go through. And so he has already graduated. And so this case isn't going to do anything for him, but it is for future high school students that schools cannot discriminate on who can use the restroom based on birth sex.
The discussion of sex being a binary. Human beings have considered sex to be a binary for 10,000 years. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's a fact. We have. Yes, there's always been two-spirited people for Native Americans, and I don't even want to try to pronounce the word from India because I always screw it up. But transgender people have always existed and recognized in many, many, many cultures throughout time as existing, and in some cases highly valuable and respected people. But still, the gender question has always been binary. Gender roles have always been binary. And it's only been in the last 50, 60 years that or 70, if you want to include World War II, that gender roles have begun to move away from the binary and into a spectrum. Okay, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. A woman should be allowed to do anything she wants, whether it's a welder or a mother at home. Just as a man should. If he wants to be a welder, great. If he wants to be the caregiving parent at home, that's fine too. And I know lots of men who do that. But people need to realize that this is going to take a few generations to change. All culture, the entire planet, the entire human race is so bought into the binary. It's just not going to break because we want it to. It's important for us to say, break it. This is what it should be. This is what people really are. But we have to be realistic about the outcomes of our protests and our efforts today. That they are building blocks for the efforts of tomorrow. And those efforts are efforts building blocks for the next generation and the next generation, and maybe in 3 or 4 generations, we're going to crack this beam. Okay.
And then
None
people will see it as
of
normal.
us will be around to see it, but we have our work to do, and we have to work at it. But be realistic about your results, because you don't want to beat yourself to death over not being 100% successful at this. It's going to be a very difficult fight for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And with that, I think it is time for us to start wrapping it up.
Thank you, Jenny. That was very well said. Yeah.
Yes. I don't think I could really improve on that. And I want to thank everyone in the chat for coming. Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you, Randolph. And before we go, I'm going to give each of you a chance to talk about whatever you have coming up. So, Jenny, why don't you go first?
I just wanted a kiss.
Oh.
Tomorrow afternoon at noon, I'll be on Purple Rhymes with Oranges show. And then at midnight on Thursday, I'll be on the Purple Rhymes with Orange midnight show. Of course, we have movie night every Friday night at 10:30 Central Time, 11:30 Eastern. And whatever other gigs I can pick up. I think B is having her usual. I forget what day it is.
The Root and Branch or the open mic?
Isn't that Friday? The open mic.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they don't announce the Root and Branch guests beforehand, so we couldn't believe you even if you said you were.
Yeah.
Yep.
B is pretty close.
B will appreciate that. B, the host.
But it's a good show. It gets going pretty interesting sometimes.
B says it's Wednesday open mic.
There we go.
That's it. Wednesday. I knew it.
She's the host. Yeah.
Glad you're here, B. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm glad she's here. Okay, so yeah, I just realized I don't need to say I'm going to be on Godless Granny's channel, as I've been telling people, because here we are. Yeah, if you want to find out more about the organization I run, Canadian Atheists, you can either find the link on the Conservapedia page or in Godless Granny's YouTube description here, or go to there directly at www.canadianatheists.ca. I'm also, I have a personal website at www.randolfrichardson.com, which also links to these places. My YouTube channel is at youtube.com/Randolf Richardson. And if your autocorrect changes the spelling of Randolph, change the PF back to an 8F, the PH, change it back to an F, and you'll be in the right place. So thank you very much for having us on, Godless Granny. Jenny, it was wonderful to hear what you had to say, and I think your points are right on. I look forward to a day when all these things are just considered normal and not people aren't creating disruption over it. That's completely unnecessary, in my opinion.
And Randolph, one question that I forgot to ask you. Your name says Randolph Richardson, and then it's some characters that look Asian, and then atheism is normal. What is that in the middle?
Atheism is normal. I'll just mention briefly as a campaign that you can read more about at www.atheismisnormal.ca. So the Chinese characters are my Chinese name. The first character is pronounced Zhang, and that's my wife's family name. So she's Chinese. So I don't have a Chinese family name given my background, so I took hers. And Wen Dao. Wen, the middle character, is the Chinese word for writing, and Dao means philosophy. Because philosophy does interest me. Again, I don't profess to be an expert in philosophy by any stretch of the imagination, although I do find it very interesting. Wen Dao sounds very similar to Randolph when it's pronounced, so it's a close approximation. So names in Chinese are meant to kind of reflect a person's interests if possible. Usually parents will pick names names for their kids that are their interests, that they hope their kids will take an interest in, or it'll have some kind of a meaning, because each character does have of a meaning, whereas in English the letters don't really have individual meanings, so it's a different kind of language. Each character in Chinese is one syllable as well, so it's a monosyllabic language, if anybody's wondering about that. But yeah, I am studying Chinese. It is the Mandarin dialect, which is the standard dialect for the Chinese language pretty much everywhere on the planet. And that's it. It is quite a fascinating and wonderful language to learn. It is more than 6,500 years old, so it has a lot of history too. But I think I probably told you enough, all that you need to know, perhaps.
Well, actually, what I'm thinking now is, according to Answers in Genesis, that's longer than the planet has existed.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned the 6,500 plus years. And it's Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, that goes back 6,500 years. The language itself probably goes back even further.
And tonight I'm Jennifer Juniper, because I'm just a burnt out old hippie with very little brain left, and I can't get Donovan out of my mind. So.
Okay, and coming up, what I have is this week I'm doing the next installment on my videos for children, and this one is it tells a little bit about my deconversion, and it is a story that is aimed at it's something that Christian parents could show their kids to tell them what atheism is all about. But this one is aimed at older kids. This one is aimed at about 9 to 14 years of age. And so it does go in a little more depth than some of the other ones that I've done. And if you came this week expecting to see Inspiring Philosophy, that is entirely my fault. I've said on a couple of streams that Inspiring Philosophy would be here today, but I did not read the calendar correctly. I was thinking that today was going to be August 3rd, and it is not August 3rd. August 3rd is next Tuesday. So if you came looking for Inspiring Philosophy, he will be here next Tuesday. Sorry, that was entirely on me, not him. But he will be here next week.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. This was a delight to be here, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in.
And Granny, I'll give you the address of where to send the check as soon as we're off the air.
Okay, sounds good. And with that, everyone, live your life.
Good night.
Good night.